Welcome to Famous Dead People with your host, Carl Dahlquist.
Hello, and welcome to Famous Dead People. Today we have two guests. First, a Western philosopher known only through the writings of his students Plato, Xenophon, and the plays of his contemporary Aristophanes. You'll never win an argument with him, yet he never claimed to be knowledgeable himself. I give you Socrates.
Thank you for having me, Carl.
So, you yourself left no writings behind. We best know you from the dialogues of your students Plato and Xenophon. Why did you write nothing yourself? And how do you feel that you have been represented in the writings that exist?
I suppose that for me to have left writings of my own you would have received my thoughts in my own words about various things. However, I also believe that it would have been egotistical for me to have done so. Through having my students and contemporaries write about me, you're able to read about how my ideas, dialogues, and lectures affected people. You've been able to read about my teachings through the lens of those who were most affected by those teachings. If you would have read these ideas from my quill, then you would have read them from a utopian and idealistic perspective, rather than from a perspective where my ideas were taken and applied to existing axioms and frameworks.
So one of the charges against you was that you were corrupting the youth. Specifically, what does your accuser, Meletus, mean by this?
Well, being that Meletus is not here to further explain his indictment, I'll do my best to shed light on what he alleged. I was accused of being a clever speaker, meaning that Meletus and others accused me of seeming and not being. They claimed that I would say things that I knew were not true in order to influence others. People of this sort are called sophists, and they are of the worst sort, even worse than poets and artisans.
You once said that the unexamined life was not worth living. Can you be more specific about what you meant?
Certainly, Carl. What I meant was that if someone went through life without being self-critical, constantly evaluating one's place in life, his associations, and how he views and affects others, then one is simply, how might you say, coasting through life, existing rather than living. It is only through our critical associations with others and how we affect our environments around us that we truly live and have purpose in such existence.
And then, as our usual final question, how did you die?
Well, Carl, I was convicted of corrupting the youth and of being impious. I was indicted by a young man that we've talked about, named Meletus. I was tried in the city of Athens, found guilty, and was sentenced to die by consuming hemlock, a rather poisonous substance. Rather than escape my plight, such as my dear Crito tried to convince me, I decided to face this fate as I had resided in Athens my entire life. I felt that because I had made no effort to either change the laws nor exile myself from the city, that I was complicit in living under them and thus had no right to challenge them when they came against me.
Our second guest today was a Chinese teacher, editor, politician, and philosopher of the spring and autumn period of Chinese history. His principles had a basis in common Chinese tradition and belief. He championed strong family loyalty and ancestor worship, respect of elders by their children, and in traditional interpretations of husbands by their wives. He also recommended family as a basis for ideal government. He espoused the well-known principle, do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself. Confucius. Your teachings have been labeled a religion by some because of the level of devotion to the large number of people who have followed them. Can you explain for your audience a little bit how some of your teachings carry religious connotations?
Yes, Carl. For the most part, my philosophy is relatively unconcerned with religion as far as being classified as such. Yes, it is true that Confucianism, as you call it, it discusses elements of the afterlife and views concerning heaven, but is relatively unconcerned with some spiritual matters often considered essential to religious thoughts.
Thank you, Confucius. Can you please explain the focus of your philosophy?
Absolutely. Whereas many religions concentrate on explicit rules of behavior, Confucianism instead concentrates on the exemplification of the self within its own context rather than within the context of the community. Think of it as a difference between teaching values instead of teaching rules. My moral teachings emphasize self-cultivation, emulation of moral exemplars, and the attainment of skilled judgment rather than knowledge of rules. Confucian ethics may be considered the type of virtue ethics. I taught the virtues of humanity rather than the rules to govern it. It is subtle, yet significant, distinct to be sure.
And as our usual Indian question, how did you die?
I died at the age of 72. There is some speculation of foul play because two of my sons died shortly before my passing. However, I was indeed distraught over their loss, and something that also contributed to my death.
And now, as a first on Famous Dead People, we were going to have a debate between our two guests. So, first off, on justice and the nature of knowledge. Both of you, please discuss your views on the nature of knowledge.
Well, knowledge is an important aspect of ethics and virtue. Virtuous action towards others begins with virtuous and sincere thought, which begins with knowledge. A virtuous disposition without knowledge is susceptible to corruption, and virtuous action without sincerity is not true righteousness. Cultivating knowledge and sincerity is also important to one's own sake. The superior person loves learning for the sake of learning, and righteousness for the sake of righteousness.
Well, Confucius, I do not believe that anyone can necessarily possess knowledge. There's only one examination of our own existence, which is entirely variable. The only knowledge that I possess is that I am not wise. I do not proclaim myself to be knowledgeable or wise on any given topic. And therefore, people have said that I am wise for the effort. Whether that is true or not is up for debate, and one that I would not partake in.
Now, discuss your feelings on justice.
We will endeavor to do so, Carl. Justice is that which regulates the world around us. It keeps things in balance. Where there is justice, there is no need for laws. The presence of justice exists where harmony exists. Furthermore, justice also regulates the body on an internal basis with the parts of the soul.
Well, I think that we will see eye to eye on this point. For me, justice refers to the concrete realization of harmony and reciprocity. To this end, justice also deals with the social order and the individual's place within that order.
Amazing that two profound thinkers, separated by thousands of miles and a century, could arrive at such a similar conclusion. And this has been another episode of Famous Dead People. Join us next time when we speak with Mrs. Stanton.